Welcome back to Working Class Revolt. This is our second episode. I am Dust James of Dust James Anti Imperialist America. My co host from Down Under, from Australia, longtime union organizer, David Fox. And it is an exciting night tonight. As everyone knows, the election has just been declared for Biden in the United States. And before we get into that depressing matter, we have a few points to start. How are you tonight, David Fox?
Well, I'm actually surprised them quite well. Interesting, with all the times it's throwing at us. We've and also too incredibly busy at the moment, and we'll you talk a bit more about that at the time. But obviously, here from Australia, we've been observing far and wide. The government here has been very, very quiet about commenting on either candidate until the winner was declared. And obviously, our Prime Minister Scott Morrison had to come out with the win, saying Joe Biden, his good friend Joe Biden. And I thought that was just tacky when I read that little
Hmm.
article. And I was just, I don't know how cheesy and tacky it could really get. That was just horrible reading that. His good friend Joe Biden. I thought, oh my God. you know, can we just not make this any dumber anymore?
Do you have a? Did you have? Did you? You had a few notes to go into.
Yes, yeah, and look, I think from here I'll just update to what we've been going through here. We've obviously just myself directly. We we're actually in. We've got an indefinite stoppage against Lactalis Australia. Now, for those of you who wonder what Lactalis is, it's a French multinational food company. It owns Australian brands such as Paul's ice cream, Paul's custards, uh, oat flavoured milk, like such as the brand names of Oak. But they've and obviously when we commenced negotiations about close to about 2.5 months ago, 3 months ago, and what's happened over the course of time. Obviously, our claim was going on 4% per annum for 3 years, and obviously certain key changes that were actually pretty important for the food industry overall. We on this side, particular. The union I work for, the Australian Manufacturing Workers Union, covers the metal trades, mechanical fitters, maintenance and electrical trades. Union covers electricians. We're looking after the maintenance employees there. We're the food production workers with United Workers Union, and on this particular site. So it's three unions involved in all this, and what's happened, this particular site, Lactalis and Bendigo, is actually one of the lower paid sites compared to the rest of the industry. So it's a lot of catch up to do. There's a lot of years of uh, falling behind. And I think because last 3 years, 4 years ago, when everyone accepted the company offer because they threatened to close the company plant, this time around there's a lot of anger, which is a good, healthy thing. There's at the moment, there's a lot of vibrant energy on the picket line. We're having everyone come down from community to wives, kids, you name it, people joining us, other members of other unions, and we're building that solidarity. The company had just put a document out for viewing for 7 days under Australian law. Under industrial law, anything that has to be voted on any document has to be voted for agreement. Enterprise agreement has to be voted. Needs to go for 7 days clear viewing before it goes to a vote. Obviously, we're reading a few things now. But they're not really good. The pay increases are not exceptionally good, and of course they've missed a few things as well. Obviously, haven't really addressed our concerns either on a few key items, especially the production workers. But I've noticed that there was a couple of things they've missed as well. So I'm actually assuming when it does. I won't say too much at the moment. I don't want to put the campaign in jeopardy, let alone get myself into trouble with this is going public. That obviously at the moment we've got a meeting tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock with the maintenance, with the members of the maintenance side, and obviously with the UW, they're organising meetings during the week to talk it through and moving forward. But at the moment, there's a lot of good energy there, and and obviously too more information we get through. I've got some details. Look, we'll be all happy. Um, we'll be still all happy to have your we have your support one way or the other, even just letters of solidarity, etc. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. The other one we've also industrial action is a Grain Corp. For those of you wondering what Grain Corp is, they're a major exporter of our wheat and other particular grains, but predominantly wheat. And the, the maintenance employees, they're same two unions, Australian Manufacturing Workers Union and Electrical Trades Union. We are now in dispute, looking to extend that dispute because the company hasn't really come back with a decent, proper pay offer. That's what it comes down primarily about. They're actually lagging behind it compared to other states here. And in New South Wales, Queensland, they're obviously on a greater rate than what they are here. That's been a sticking point. And also, there's two agreements we have got with Grain Corp. We've got the regional one, which we're dealing with, and you have the one on the ports. Those that are working on the ports are getting a higher rate, but if they have to come up and help out in the regional areas, they still stay on that higher rate. So you can just imagine for example, two fitters, one on a higher rate and the other on a lower rate, doing the same work. You can just see that animosity. So we've obviously applied for further action and looking to do now proper stoppages. They were just indefinite bans and limitations, and now it's moving to proper stoppages of work. We'll be discussing that as we with the members as we move further into the dispute, and it'd be interesting to see what Grain Corp come back next. But it is a bumper crop. I've never seen wheat fields so thick with wheat in my whole entire life. They're starting to do the harvest now in the northwest of Victoria and elsewhere, and obviously move down, but they can't even get enough harvesters to come in to harvest the crop. So that's just shows you. That's just a couple of examples. Obviously, we've commenced negotiations with another food company, Sunbeam Foods in Mildura. It's only commencing the third round of negotiations, but there's possibly we might be applying for a protected industrial action. And just on that, why we call it protected industrial action. Under law, we can't just go officially just walk out and strike unless we workers and the union bodies face severe penalties. We do apply for a protected action ballot order through the old Arbitration Commission, which is now called the misnamed Fair Work Commission. It should be called the Unfair Work Commission. And if all has been followed according to suit, he will grant it, and it will go out to a ballot to be voted up, and then we can then commence it legally without having to have any penal provisions thrown at us. So that's if it all goes through that process. So it's quite a complex process here. And obviously, I've just commenced negotiations with now another multinational American one called Flowserve. I think they're headquartered in Houston, Texas. And it was originally the old Thompson Kelly plant down in Castlemaine, which is only about half an hour south of here in Bendigo. We commenced there, but I won't comment. We've started off negotiations. So, but we're expecting no to everything we put forward. That's not to be surprised. So, but look, if further reports move on. I haven't got any other further reports on union struggles here at the moment. The only other thing is the Federal Industrial Relations Minister, Christian Porter, has drafted legislation. I don't know what's in the detail, but look, let's just assume it's not a really good situation. What they will have got drafted there after countless discussions with the Business Council of Australia and our Commonwealth union body, the Australian Council of Trade Unions. That's where we're at the moment here in Australia. That there's probably no doubt other union disputes happening around. I just haven't been up to date with them to properly comment on there. So furthermore,
go ahead. You're involved in all of those, or just
the ones I reported on about with Lactalis Australia, Grain Corp, Sunbeam, and Flowserve. Yes.
Wow, that is. I just want to thank you for all the work you do for the international working class. People, a lot of people in the socialist movement, more left wing infantile disorder type folks like to disparage the union movement, you call it. And there is a problem with union purism, but the idea of solidarity, an injury to one is an injury to all. And if you can raise the wages or keep the wages back. You're raising the wages of all workers
Yep.
across the world, the international working class. So you're actually out on the picket line in the sun, or
Yes, yes,
hours at a
yeah.
time. Is it exciting? You got chants? Can you give us a chant?
Oh, look, I don't want to yell it out now if I don't destroy the microphone. But when we you say union, we say power. You say union, we say power. And that's the
Nice, nice.
so. I mean, look, there was an incident there on. I can report on this because it's true. I think it was Friday morning, the second day of Butte, and I won't mention the name, but a particular senior manager came flying around the corner in their car, and nearly knocked two workers over.
What?
That just killed them. And then they came out later on, storming out, abusing everyone. Well, that certainly didn't help things at all. So that's it doesn't assist things to trying to come to a good resolution. It certainly just geared everyone on. They've obviously the disputes are going to increase, and what's also important for Marxists or Marxist-Leninists to be involved in unions. The reason being, their schools of struggle, schools of socialism, and yes, unions have got limitations. They are products of the capitalist system, yeah, but they're forms of they're basic working class organisations. And even though some of these disputes are just basic around wages and conditions, it's still a form of class struggle, a struggle between labour and capital. Our role is to not just help those workers to obtain their goal, improve their lot, but also to develop their consciousness further, to develop into an ideological one it's the system that needs to change from capitalism to socialism. And union pickets and union disputes are a good starting point anywhere, regardless of what the union is or how size the workforce. And I think it's vitally important because that's a concentration of workers there. They are engaged in struggle, and also it helps them too if they do have a wing. You can actually develop their consciousness or their confidence to actually be organised more to actually change the system. And because I got asked once, why haven't we never had why aren't we haven't got a general strike, or why aren't workers willing to rear up and rise up, and take the system on? It's because they don't. They're they're not organised, but two, they don't have the confidence to do so. If they've got realised what the ability they're able to do, well, then we'll be in a totally different situation and having a completely different discussion now. So, yeah, that's where we're at, and obviously next year I'm going to have many more negotiations to commence with companies. So as time proceeds, and I believe employers would like to go on the offensive. Let's make it known. Let's make it a known fact out there. They will go on the offensive, and I like a book I did read. I wish I've now brought it with me. There's the story about Brother Bill McKee, who was one of the early founders, early founders of the United Auto Workers there in Ford's plant in the Rouge River in Detroit. He was one of the primary leaders to lead the sit-down strikes to form that union. But he had a saying, what is ever given to you now will always be taken back. So, pardon me, it's water. So that's always in keeping the back in their mind. And if we're not organised and prepared not just defend what we've got, but advance further, well, then we're going to be falling back further back with what we're seeing in our respective countries. So that's where we're at the moment. Thank you.
Right on, right on. That's very inspiring for someone in my position who is not represented. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have 11% union representation nationwide, and in North Carolina, a part of the Black Belt South, part of the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, new Jim Crow, we have 4% representation. 4% of workers in North Carolina have union representation. And it wasn't always like that. And there was a huge strike down with the tobacco workers in the 1940s. And there was another push for unionization in the 1970s. Norma Ray also known as Crystal Lee Sutton. I actually met before she left us, and I sang a song at uh, her memorial. I guess maybe I'll try if I wasn't gonna. I was just thinking about it. Let me see, the Commonwealth of Toil. Let me remember a few lyrics from it. In the gloom of mighty cities, mid the roar of whirling wheels, we're toiling on like chattel slaves of old. And our masters hope to keep us ever thus beneath their heels, and to turn our very lifeblood into gold. But we have a glowing dream of how fair the world will seem when each man can live his life secure and free. When the earth is owned by labor and there's joy and peace for all in the commonwealth of toil that is to be. That I sung that for the memorial for Crystal Lee Sutton, which they made a movie of, Norma Ray, and that was taught to a comrade who taught it to me by
Mm.
um, Crystal Lee Sutton. So
Mm.
I've never had the fortune of being in a union, but I have the history and the heritage of what pushes me in the right direction. The knowledge and the culture of solidarity was instilled in me by the union movement in the deep struggle here in North Carolina. The Tobacco Workers Union in Winston-Salem was one of the first integrated unions in the South, and it was pushed by communists in the 1940s, right before the McCarthy era. Um, Good stuff. I guess we'll move on. Is there
Yeah.
any important anniversaries today?
Yes, there is. 7th of November, if everyone heard, 1917 is the 103rd anniversary of the Russian Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution. And I believe, too, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist Leninists, they've done live their evening. Uh, and I was just watching a presentation by one of their founding members, Comrade Harper Bra. Did an excellent presentation on that very important date in world history and our history as well. It was the first time ever that socialism was the first socialist revolution ever. This we had, the previous revolutions placated basically one exploitative system with another, aka the French Revolution. Although it was an important milestone, but it replaced the exploitative nature of feudalism with the exploitation of capitalism instead. But this was important now. This was now during post capitalism with socialism. And we can see that the USSR from then on, of course, it was under attack from day one, from its birth, and it had a civil war, war of intervention, but they grew to be one of the major superpower of the 20th century. You saw they defeated the Nazi war machine, the most powerful military machine at that time, and Imperial Japan as well. They industrialized. They actually turned around an illiterate population to one of the high illiteracy rates in all the world. And they actually respected culture. They enhanced it. They were they are leaders, world leaders in technology. I mean, they put the first people in space and the first rockets up into space. And obviously, too, they liberated Eastern Europe from the Nazi junta and played an important role in supporting other anti-imperialist struggles and struggles of national liberation. And they were an aspiring for all workers. And even in our countries, both the US and Australia here, and no doubt Canada, New Zealand, and UK, it was because of the Soviet Union and the strength of the working class here in our respective countries, we were able to achieve phenomenal things. Even just from the wages and conditions we enjoyed to the weekend, annual leave, you name it, but even other democratic rights we managed to achieve was because of that. The ruling class were shaking in their feet. They know they're on the nose. They always know they were on the nose, and they were shaking in their boots. So they had to give concessions. They realised the militancies of and the organisation of the working class and the imperialist countries, capitalist countries, and also the external, the Soviet Union. And obviously that inspired everything. And you could see right through from then on, China, 1949, Korea, Vietnam, etc. And Cuba as well. I won't forget Cuba. That's it certainly it was a great inspiration, and it's still worthwhile. What does it mean for us today, and what's there to learn as well?
How many years ago was that?
103 years ago.
103 years. And what was the timeline? It's November, right?
Yes.
What exactly happened on November 7th?
That was I believe, the storming of the Winter Palace on that particular day.
And then later on, was a year later, the October Revolution, the Bolshevik this is the bourgeois revolution, right? I'm a little confused with the timeline.
Oh, right.
Maybe some of the guy.
Let's go back a bit early. Early the year was the overthrow of the Tsar. Yeah, and they formed the provincial government. The provincial government came in with all sorts of promises of stopping the war, and all that didn't. And wanted to continue with the.
I got you.
Yeah, and of course that time things were starting to rise again, and Lenin came back into then known as what was Russia before it was the Soviet Union. And at that time, there was many debates moving forward, but there were uprisings everywhere, even amongst soldiers, but workers, and it had to be that concerted, coordinated.
So they stormed the Winter Palace today. That's beautiful and amazing, and led to that great revolution. And the United States, the New Deal era was inspired by the 5-year plans of the Soviet Union, and communist organizers organized unemployment councils to give us unemployment insurance that they barely extended during the COVID crisis. So we'll talk about the big news item. Since I'm in the United States, I'll give a quick report, just a quick shout out to all the friends and comrades watching. I got the Facebook open, I got the YouTube open. Falcone General, long live Fidel and Chavez, right on. And hey guys, join the Green Party. Let's make it socialist, more socialist ever before. We'll talk about that later. And then a status on the 100th anniversary of the October Revolution. 3 years ago, I visited St. Petersburg. Well, that is great. If you want to do an interview on working class, anti-imperialist America would love to interview about that if you get a chance. His status, give me an email, workingclassrevolt@gmail. I had that Gmail long before I did the show. Actually, I already told people I named all my vehicles Working Class Revolt. That's the name of the show. That's also my email, workingclassrevolt@gmail.com. If you're interested in doing an interview with me, a status, that'd be great. And shout out to the folks on Facebook, Red Indio Skits, Cameron Fortin Cook, Amanda Brown, others. Thank you. So we're going to get right into the news. The election. Go ahead.
If you're wondering why my skin colour is so red, originally I used to be a lot more ginger, so I don't tan. Because I've been out in the sun for the last 2-3 days in a pickup line, and I get. So I was looking at it, and I was like, God, I'm looking so red.
What was that chant? What was that chant again? I forgot it. I got to remember it.
Say power, union power, union power.
We say union. Okay, we say union. You say
power.
Don't you have to say, we say union, you say?
We say union, you say power. Union power, union power.
Union power, right on. You said, okay, so we're going to get right into the main news event on Tuesday. There was an election in the United States. I have a little son myself driving the trucks. They got me working 6/12s a week, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, and I'm a little tired. But Tuesday, there was an election in the United States, and from the get-go, there was more mail-in ballots than ever before, and the youth voted in high numbers for Biden. And from the get go, straight out the gate, they counted the early voting. The early voting was basically already counted the second they opened the ballot up. So right from the beginning of that night, Biden looked like he was winning because the early vote was young people, people who don't normally vote, oppressed people, black folks, brown folks, poor folks came out in high numbers to vote for Biden. And they came out early and they mailed in. Now, going up to the election about 2 o'clock, most of the people who voted for Trump in person that day. And they're counting the in-person votes. And around 2 a.m. election night, it looked like it was pretty close, and Trump declared victory at 2 a.m. Even though it was still leaning towards Biden, Trump basically declared victory. And then every night this week, it's been getting closer to Biden. And Trump has continually declared victory and has declared there is massive fraud and has declared there is these are going to have lawsuits, and the media is slowly turning on him. Fox News is slowly, they used to be nothing but behind Trump. They're slowly trying to introduce the idea to the very passionate Trump supporters and Trump supporters. The Republicans came out in mass as well. Usually less than 50%, of Americans will vote even in a presidential election. That's because we barely have a choice. And I think this time it was about 60%. So a rise in 10% of the vote came out. And they came out for Trump and they came out against Trump. It was basically a referendum on Trump. Do you want your imperialism done with decor and so-called decency, or do you want your bombs rained down vulgarly and sexist and more overt about it? How would you like the person who is raining down bombs on over 8 countries to be more dignified or to be more vulgar? That was essentially what the election was, and it looks to this point that the Associated Press at 11:30 today called the election, and it was the swing state of Pennsylvania. They actually pushed him over the top, and Pennsylvania was actually going to go red. It was leaning red, but the overwhelming amount of mail-in ballots from places like Pittsburgh and other cities flipped it around. A few interesting notes about the vote. Two interesting voting blocks. The Southwest, or the two oppressed nations in the United States, the Southwest Aslan. It was Arizona and Nevada that helped put Biden over the top. These are the children, and specifically Arizona, these are the children of Mexican immigrants. And this is the Chicano vote and the growing Chicano community in the Southwest. And also, the Black Belt South is very mentionable because it was a manipulation of the Black Belt South to buy off parts of the bourgeois and the community to suppress Bernie Sanders. Way back during the that was a turning point in the election. All of the bourgeois establishment forces dropped out at the same time, endorsed Biden, and then there was millions of dollars put into the more bourgeois opportunist figures in the African American community in the heart of the Black Belt South. And that was a changing point in the election that put Biden over the top. And that was also a voting bloc, particularly in the state of Georgia. Georgia, the heart of the Black Belt South, which hasn't voted for a Democrat since the 90s, switched over to blue in this election. So they came out, and that's interesting. Malcolm X would say, I won't repeat some of the stuff, but he had a firm notion that working class and oppressed people cannot go around identifying with a party that has given us nothing. Specifically, the oppressed communities that their vote is used. And the second after election day, the people are giving almost nothing in return for their vote. There's some interesting speeches. There's one called I recommend a YouTube video by Malcolm X. You're a chump. But I won't go too far into that. Another thing was young voters came out for Biden. A few mentions on this election. So the name of this show is National Chauvinism runs rampant after U.S. election. So the state apparatus, NPR, National Public Radio, which is an out-and-out representation of the CIA and the imperialist system, the brainwashing state media apparatus of NPR, which comes out in support of Black Lives Matter, which comes out on some social issues. When it comes to Venezuela, they're viciously attacking him. And today, as Biden won the election, it was said, oh, it's so wonderful that Trump lost because Trump is just like Nicolas Maduro. And that is why it is good that Trump lost. It is a return to normalcy. It is a return to the way things have been. There was a lot of American exceptionalism. This is the idea of this is the greatest country in the world has come back. There was just a disgusting display of overt chauvinist nationalism all over this country, a blue wave of chauvinist nationalism. Like, oh, this small group of anti-establishment, finally the establishment's back. Finally normalcy's back. Well, I made a post right before this. It's time to celebrate the election of Biden, or a return to normalcy. Well, were you at the Occupy demonstrations as they were being raided by the police? Were you at Standing Rock while Native Americans were shot with hoses, with chemical weapons, and attacked with dogs? Were you in the Were you remember during the Obama administration where Obama went down to Flint and pressured mostly African American workers to drink lead-infused water? Were you there when the Obama-Biden regime put anarchists in unmarked vans during the G20? Were you there when the Obama-Biden administration raided the Freedom Road Socialist Organization and performed interrogations? Invaded Libya? The list goes on. And the U.S. media is praising figures like McCain, praising figures like Bush, Oh, McCain, why doesn't Trump have a concession speech? Give a concession speech. The concession speech of McCain was absolutely beautiful. The concession, or not the concession speech, but the way the transition happened between Bush and Obama was absolutely beautiful. Bush was part of the transition team. Why don't we have that civility? All of these people I mentioned, McCain is one of the worst warmongers humanity has ever seen. McCain has been pushing for the U.S. to get in every single conflict that existed in his lifetime. I am absolutely disgusted. I have a sick feel. The amount I knew this was going to happen. I knew that Biden was going to get elected. I mean, it was all probability. But when I saw people I knew on Facebook, people I thought well of, praising the win, praising Biden, when I heard it on the media, when I felt the atmosphere, I'm disgusted and distraught, and I'm concerned. I posted that I have a sick feeling in my stomach, the amount of nationalism being shown, and I had a Venezuelan woman respond. How do you think I feel? It was Biden who attempted a coup in 2015 in my country. Um, Also, I stated the amount we already know. Biden has already proven himself a more efficient imperialist simply by the larger and more diverse group of mass support that he has. Um, I know I'm a little tired and a little out of it. That's the best I got. You have anything to add to the elections in the United States?
Well, look, I made a comment on my own Facebook page the other day. We've got to do more than just change the government. You've got to have to change the system that needs to be changed. And I also made a comment that the working class is still going to come under persistent attack, even with Biden the president. Because you're right, there was a lot of people cheering Biden on and thinking, "Oh, this is a wonderful moment." It's not a wonderful moment at all for anybody. And when people come up to me, well, it's either Republican or Democrat. No, it's not. And you want to comment more on that later on. But in fact, is the end of the day, we've got to keep in mind they're two parties of capitalism, two parties of imperialism. And it's like within our own respective countries, like here in Australia, with the Labor Party and the Liberal National parties, right? Liberal National Party is a Conservative Party, and your Labor Party, although yes, it was founded originally by trade unions, but it is a Liberal Party. It's a Liberal Capitalist Party. And their primary role is to uphold imperialism and capitalism. And same within Britain as well. The other thing as well with the British Labour Party. Yes, it might have had some certain connections to the working class, but it is a party of capitalism along with the Conservatives. They're there to maintain and uphold imperialism. And we've always got to keep that in the back of our minds. It wasn't, yeah, sure, Trump was obnoxious.
Hey, David, a quick technical note. I've had several comments about this. Your mic is a little
Right.
low. Is there
Is
any
it?
way to speak more directly and clearly into the
Yes. All
microphone?
right. Let's look at the microphone for a sec. Sorry, guys. Didn't mean that. Should be all right. Is that better? Hello? Is that better?
It's good on my end. If people want to comment whether the microphone is better on David Fox,
I'll
go
try
ahead
and
and
do one
continue.
to it. I was sitting right back and yeah.
Go ahead.
Is that better?
It seems to be fine. We'll get more comments on it. Just you can go ahead and keep
Yeah.
going.
Look, just going back to it, I think we've, as I said, I understand these are parties of capital or imperialism, and they're there to maintain and uphold the system on behalf of the capitalist class, and that's their primary role. And actually, I do like to actually lead everyone to a book called Social Democracy: The Enemy Within by Comrade Arpel Bra. You can order it through the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist Leninist. Although it was talking predominantly about the British Labour Party, I think it's vitally important to understand this, to read what social democracy and what some of these parties that pertaining to be liberal left, even I think how you guys in America would talk about it, to understand it and what they are and what it's all about, its historical roots. Actually, if you refer back to the book, The History of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster, you can see where the roots of these parties are. So nothing's going to, for everyone in the US, especially working class people in the US, minorities. Well, I'm not saying it won't change, but obviously, what's going to happen? The attacks are going to intensify further. Uh, what's going to be important to sort of understand that. I've seen some of the live footage that people dancing in the streets in Washington, New York, parties everywhere. Yeah, like okay, yes, Trump will. Like I've just out sounding like a broken record or a scratch record. Trump is obnoxious, he's sexist, he's all those things. But the fact is, the end of the day, regardless if it was Trump, Biden, your next door neighbour, whatever is running as president, they'd still have to maintain and uphold the rule of capital. It's just how that's going to go about. And I saw one of the commentaries here about using the military to go in other countries. The fact is, yeah, right. They don't need permission either from Biden or Trump at all. They'll just go ahead and do it. So it's just, but what they're doing is consolidating. And also, too, I just want to outline this. What they're doing is consolidating the oil banking rule of the US, where Caleb mentioned out that Trump pretty much represented the wealthy, and Biden or Democrats represented the super wealthy, the oil bankers, the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the Citibanks, all them, and finance capital. And where Trump represented small oil like fracking, etc. So, and you could see that those two factions they were representing, and the super wealthy definitely wanted to push the wealthy out. And this is what we're seeing playing out here, not just in the US, but also around the world as well. So that's it's something to always keep in mind about that. But it's quite interesting. And also, I was going to ask too about the commentary about independents and others out there that ran, because it would be interesting to see the amount of people who have voted for different candidates. That have supported different candidates. They could see right through the Republican Democrat smokescreen and think, well, no, we want to look at someone who's that actually better representing working class interests and the interests of the people than Biden and Trump.
Okay. Let's see. We're 42 minutes in. I was going to do a short presentation on voting third party in the United States. And the truth about third parties in the United States, they are remarkably small, and they get very little. They have very little voting power. But I still back them and still push them, because there is absolutely no hope in the finance-controlled Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders has been sheepdogging, meaning he puts up great things and gets the people up feeling good about healthcare, promises that, and then he fell out. This is the second time he's run and lost, and he fell out halfway through, and then backed Biden. Sheepdog, leading people firmly behind the imperialist. And then other figures like the Squad, AOC, they have betrayed the people. AOC met with the coup leaders in Bolivia, the fascists, the crypto-Christian fascists that were murdering indigenous people in Bolivia. AOC met with them. And AOC's being backed by Nancy Pelosi. They're good friends. It seems like anyone, this insurgency that we tried to have has been completely and utterly co-opted by the Democratic establishment, which is the establishment, more interventionist party of the ruling class.
Yep.
And there's no hope for working people. So what's the other option? We recently had in the United States, there was a movement called the Movement for a People's Party, which took some Democratic forces, To be honest, they're new, and there was some of those people that were actually voting Biden this year. I think they're too watered down. They're like Democrat light, you know. But the largest left wing um, grassroots, they call themselves eco socialists. And in that eco socialist plan is a Green New Deal, which would basically nationalize the entire energy sector and nationalize the banking system. So I consider the Green Party on those 2 points socialist. They call themselves eco socialists. And I believe in China there's a government institution called the Department of Eco Socialism in China. I mean, this is a real climate change. This is a real issue. We also have growing this year, particularly got some of the votes, and they're doing good organizing. The Party for Socialism and Liberation, Gloria La Riva, is doing good work. And I just want to give a big congratulations to everyone who did the right thing and stepped outside of the corporate controlled imperious duopoly. The workers need a party controlled by them, or we will get nowhere. We will get nowhere. Unfortunately, the biggest third party in the United States is the Libertarian Party, and they routinely receive 5% of the vote. They received 1% of the vote this time. But I would argue the Libertarian Party, although better on being less of an interventionist, they're used by the capitalists simply to get austerity. They're always against the government, and usually the Libertarian Party is simply used to pressure the government to implement policies of austerity. And they do not represent the working class, and they should not be supported. I mean, you can go out to an anti-war vigil with libertarians, but they're not a third party that should be supported by socialists. I mean, child labor, for one. The biggest one's the Green Party. The Green Party, the last 2 election cycles, got 1% with Jill Stein. And this year, the propaganda, the money that was spent, the hype around Trump, only 0.02% of the vote went to Howie Hawkins. Extremely low. I mean, well, there was also high turnout rate. You went from 50 to 60% of the voter population. I believe it was 348,000 that voted Jill Stein 2016, and it was. No, I'm sorry. It was 469,000 that voted Jill in 2016. It was 348,000. So we lost about 100,000 votes in the face of this brutal propaganda campaign from the dominant institution controlled party. So I will continue to back, at least on the presidential level. I will continue to back the Green Party or whatever third party is breaking them, as many people as possible away from the imperialist duopoly. U.S. imperialism leads the worst enemy that has ever existed in human history, from genocides to hunger. I mean, the struggle is real. And giving support to that political body like the Democrats. That's why I'm so disgusted by what's going on right now. Masses of working people, oppressed people in the United States, are cheering on a war criminal and a racist, the architect of the new Jim Crow, K. Mala, Cop Mala, the enforcer of the new Jim Crow. The new Jim Crow is how they lock up poor black and brown people, criminalize them, take away their job opportunities, take money out of those communities. It's absolutely disgusting. I think the biggest third vote was back under Nader, and a lot of people blame the election being stolen. Well, a vote for the third party is a vote for the third party. There's no hope within the Democrats, and that is I believe, the only electoral solution. And as always, I think day one was more important than any electoral situation is to organize your community and workplace.
Yep.
Any response to that?
Well,
One more thing. The reason why the libertarians are so big in the United States is because we have had a brutal, repressive, McCarthyist Red Scare campaign since the 1950s. So a lot of the people who don't like Republicans or Democrats will go to the libertarians. So go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's sort of important we always watch that because the mainstream media will not really report on any of the third parties or independents or socialist parties that are running any given time. We are to expect that as well. But it's vitally important we always acknowledge it. And it's a great way to actually despite it's still important. And I know there's comrades out there who take a more ultra-left position. We shouldn't participate at all, just ignore elections. Wrong again. That's a real mistake. I did that once, bad mistake. We need to put a working class voice out there so we can communicate the message out to the masses because elections can be used as a great tool for us to put the message out there further and to educate people further and expose the system further. It's not, whereas in all our respective countries here, they're not great democratic institutions, elections or parliaments or House of Representatives. When they say they're democratic institutions, let's face it, they're not great bastions of democracy at all. They're only democracy for one class and one class alone. That's the capitalist class. But we still need to participate and use whatever tools we've got through it. The other thing as well, it was interesting. I think it was the state of Vermont, a communist ran, Marxist-Leninist. I think he got close to 3,500 votes, which was 1% of the vote. Now, for some other people, that might not be a big deal. But the fact is, it is a big deal because they were getting the message out there. But there was 3,500 people that got the message and to communicate as well. So, and that's where we can use to build on and on. Well, obviously, mainstream media will ignore that. They'll try and wipe it off the history books altogether. We know that. And the most important, we can use that as well. So, look, it's not all that was. Look, struggle's going to be intensifying, and was what we're going to be doing under our respective material conditions of our respective countries, and how we're going to operate, and that's vitally important. This will all calm down. Maybe I don't know how it's going to play out over the course of the next few weeks in the US. There's all sorts of speculation what's happening at the moment. Media, will Trump do this and Biden do that? Will there be uprising? It's just, look, who knows? But the most important thing is we need to get ourselves out there. As the saying goes, let's get out of the movement. Let's get into the masses. We've got a purpose. As good as any time to do it is now.
Right. What was the number you gave on the guy in Vermont?
It was 3.5. Don't quote me on that number though. That's I was looking. It could be more, could be less.
Okay, I think I'm looking at the post. It's 3,000, which was 1%. 3,429, which was 1%. What was 3,429? 1% of that district in Vermont. And I mentioned that there's been a brutal McCarthyist campaign since the 1950s. Our leftist movement has been destroyed, and our labor movement has been decimated because of it. And the fact we have an open Marxist-Leninist, some states in the United States, you are not allowed to run if you are a communist. It's on the books, on the law. Immigrants are not allowed to receive legal status if they have been a part of a communist party in their respective countries. It is a test on the citizenship question. And just now to have somebody get 1% of the vote, even in a northeastern state like Vermont, shows the fading away of red baiting in this country, which could change the entire conversation, change the entire dynamic. We talked about unions earlier, and a lot of communists, especially here in the South, have to keep their communist organizations underground if they want any chance unionizing. If they want to be in union leadership, they have to keep their communist parties underground and secretive, and they can't discuss them, even in the current political climate. In my lifetime, um, I have seen that, and to see David Fox openly communist publicly in the union movement gives me hope in Australia. Hopefully, that will happen here. And even myself, just an individual, Dust James is close to my real name, but I don't put my last name, even though I put my face. A lot of communist YouTubers in the United States will cover their face or only use voice because we're scared of the repercussions of the right wing trolling us. I myself, I trolled the local reactionary racist political group, and I pissed them off to the point where they ran a criminal background check on me and called my employer trying to get me fired for advocating communism online. It is a uphill battle here in the United States, and it's beautiful to see stuff like that going on.
Yeah. Look, let's not say comrades even they have sometimes used different names or changed their name slightly. I thought about doing it too. I mean, look, I'm a little bit more out there. I think probably than some others. I just think it probably might be in my blood. I don't know what it is, but um, yeah, I mean, it's look, I can understand that, and like I've spoken with my own live chat for union activism as well, especially if you're in a hostile environment, in a workplace too that you do want unionised. You do have to work under those material conditions where there's hostile environment. You've probably got a very hostile employer, and there are forces outside there. You need to work covertly at who you can trust to build those and find out who you can trust, building relations. That story about Brother Bill McKee, how he was one of the founders of the United Auto Workers there in Detroit, Michigan. Fact is, they had to work under those type of conditions, very similar to conditions to what you guys are experiencing now. And there was actually all sorts of committees all over the place at that time. They because they're not only just dealing with the sack and unemployment, they're also dealing with thugs, threat of violence, loss of life, the whole lot. So there's few of the things, but so it's a good idea. Don't just go running in there with the flag. Look, that you have one, you could really put yourself, isolate yourself very quickly too, but you're putting yourself at risk. I think it's just what do we call a bit of common sense and logic as well. Okay, I'm in a very hostile environment. If I speak up right now, I'm going to be the one that's turfed out, and that's where these things you always got to just always be sure just to know your terrain as well. That's what I would like to say. Yeah, map your terrain, know it very well, and then you can start from there. It's not impossible to do it, but it's just you've got to be a little bit careful, and I get that as well. And look, I cop it as well at times from people. They know my politics, ideology, and look, I mean, I'm probably a little bit more thick-skinned than some. I'll just swap it off, but other times I will turn around and explain a few facts. But also, too, don't put yourselves in a moment of danger either. It was interesting because there was debate about actually having debates with fascists. And look, if that does arise and you want to go and have a debate with a fascist, do not put yourself in danger either. Do it like an online forum like this. It's probably the safest way to do it, and have a good mediator as well to control it because things can get out of hand. Because I don't know if it's ever happened in your respective country. It did happen here many, many years ago. It's probably when I was a very young boy. Someone, this one, faction, was like the Nazi, invited someone who was a communist to have a debate. They took up the offer. They had the debate. The ball was packed out, mainly with fascists. But when the communists left, he actually got bashed. So just it was a whole group of them set upon him and bashed him. So yeah, I mean he was hospitalised, and that's just something we've got to keep in mind. You're not dealing with very pleasant people at all, or respectful people either. These people are extremists, they're dangerous. Some of them, so just always keep that in your back of your mind. Obviously, I think it's always take that set of caution as well. And look, same thing too. Don't if you need to have you make some contact details or something, maybe get a spare phone, a different email address. Definitely don't give away a place where you live, and as well keep that within a very few close friends and family. But don't have to give that. It's just certain things to keep in your back of your mind. So yeah, look, I actually really emphasise always just be careful and be cautious about things, and I respect that as well. Why people use different pseudonyms a whole lot. Believe it, in the United States, I mean, as I said, there were some laws that I weren't aware of that you couldn't participate, and that's unbelievable, But these are a hangover of the McCarthy era.
Looks like we're over the 60 minutes. I kind of wanted to end on a high note, but all the rest of our news items are all depressing. I guess I'll read them off real quickly, and then maybe you can respond as you will. There was also an election in Puerto Rico, and there was a referendum, which was weirdly weirdly worded. It was a yes or no, and it basically manipulated people into voting for statehood, which the U.S. probably will disagree with. But there's been a long history of colonialism in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is a lot. The standard of living is way worse than Cuba. It is a major military base. There's problems with drugs and prostitution. And they had a hurricane. They lost most recently. They lost most of their power. Their power grid is on and off. The people are coming together. They're supporting third parties. Education was a big deal, and about 10 years ago, the people went on strike. That's an ongoing struggle. Back when they had the hurricane, um, uh, they were still under like mercantile laws. Basically, anything that is shipped to Puerto Rico has to be taxed by the U.S. and then goes through the port in Florida before it's allowed to go to Puerto Rico. It's not allowed to come directly from China or Europe. It has to go to Florida, get taxed, and then go to Puerto Rico. So think about how much money is being extorted from a poor colonized island, just ripped out of the hands of hungry, starving people. It's absolutely disgusting. And I think the U.S. should be forced to pay reparations for the island of Puerto Rico, regardless, at least, if not the government, the corporations that made money off that trade. That's a demand we should have. Guess I'll do the other two news items. A global warming is continued. We had the firefighters. We had the fires in the West in California. There was a major hurricane. Hurricane Eta killed over 150 people in Guatemala. Also hit Nicaragua. I'm guessing the socialist country of Nicaragua is probably handling that far better than the neo-colonial country of Guatemala. Also, COVID deaths and cases have reached an all-time high in the United States. Not to be laughed at. Our neighbors are dying. Elderly folks, poor black and brown folks in the higher numbers. Our states are doing almost nothing. The government, the President Trump. I mean, if he was a fascist, he probably would have declared martial law and took power over this. He easily could have. But what he did instead was neglect, willful negligence, which is by giving the power, by giving the responsibility of the COVID crisis to the states individually. The states individually having to have bidding wars over protective equipment. raising the price because each state has to defend for themselves. No national strategy. It's effectively murder by willful negligence on the part of the federal government. And a lot of people were saying how, well, maybe the Democrats would have handled this better. And I would say that Biden had the same donors from the pharmaceutical industry that Trump had. One of the things about the COVID when it first started was that gave eh, Trump had the option of buying, I believe, a German produced a cheap effective test used by the World Health Organization. Instead of buying the cheap effective test, he made sure that U.S. drug companies got to make one, and it only worked like a third of the time and allowed COVID to spread. And it hasn't been anything since. But Biden was financed by the same drug companies. If you want to talk about public health, just look what happened in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
The people, mostly African American working people, had their water poisoned through austerity. The privatized non-elected body decided to switch their water source from a more expensive source to a cheaper source, and it resulted in mass outbreaks of lead poisoning. Barack Obama went to Flint, Michigan, said this is the tap water, and it proceeded to fake drink it to persuade people to drink lead infused water. That is the Obama Biden regime. You think they would have done better on COVID? All right. um, go ahead on those 3 points, and I guess we'll and
Well,
anything else. Go ahead.
as I said, yeah, early in the piece, it's got to be more than just change the government, change the system. And look, the struggle is going to intensify even under Biden. It's either one that was going to win. I've seen some comments even by people, oh, well, Trump would have been better for the developing nations, imperialists. Well, no, I don't think so, to be honest with you. Neither of them are. And the fact is, when you look for the whole charade and what's going on, I think that's more important. It's all the people behind them that are worrying. With Biden, you've got Kamala Harris, which is the book that Caleb just recently released. I'm still waiting for the copy to get here eventually to Australia. And you can see the intensification of the prison industrial complex, the low wage police state, and that's going to be happening here too. One way or the other, it's one they would prefer, or it's locked up working for free or for a very bare minimum. And the other thing too about with climate change, that's still on the cards as well. It's interesting. We actually need to get our hands on that because unfortunately the Liberal left Democrats, if they get hold of it, basically they're representing a certain faction of the ruling class, but it's basically the big oil bankers have got control of it, funding all these so-called green deals and green things and setting that agenda. Uh, that needs to get back to it because the Green New Deal under them would be low wages, um, East Meal type wages, the whole lot. We're seeing that now with the setup of solar farms, etc., exploiting labour even further by bringing for here in Australia backpackers or people who work on subsistence rates instead of actually proper, good, genuine union rates when they build them and when they service these things as well. So always keeping in the back of that mind as well. The other one is, going back to the third parties and all that, the Green Party, I'd just like to actually say, with the Green Party, here in Australia, one of the leading founders of the Green Party, the Australian Greens here, Dr. Bob Brown, did you know when he was a young doctor, he actually treated Jimi Hendrix, and even when Jimi Hendrix was pronounced dead, he died. And yeah, so there you go. He was the young doctor at the time that treated Jimi Hendrix. So a little bit of history there for you. And Puerto Rico, it's that struggle for their independence is going to be really long term. And yeah, I think it's like with anything, any type of elections becoming a republic or national independence. We could sort of relate it here. We had a referendum back in the year 2000, or believe no 1998, I think it was, or 2001, I think it was. Yeah, 1998 for a republic, and the fact is to remove a constitutional monarchy as our head of state. but the question was completely distorted in such a way that it will make it seem, well, if you vote for this model, it's the parliament will nominate your president. And I know people would like to directly, here in Australia, would likely directly elect their president, not have it nominated by parliament. But just the way it was completely distorted, that question really got us nowhere at all for that. So yeah, for the people of Puerto Rico, my heart goes out for you. You certainly, certainly your struggle is going to be a long and tedious one as well, to get genuine, to achieve genuine independence. And I didn't know that for a fact, that actually all their imports have to be taken through the US into Florida, taxed, and then sent to it instead of a direct ship straight through there. Because I thought Puerto Rico was part of the US at one stage. Currently, I thought they would have had it, but apparently not. They're treated as second-class citizens, like a lot of the territories of Marshall Islands, Virgin Islands, and Guam as well. So they don't have any voting rights, no say of the internal affairs.
They have citizenship technically, but they have no voting say in the United States.
No, not even that. Yeah.
So you mentioned this. Quick shout out to the Center for Political Innovation, which,
Yes.
if you see the logo on the bottom of this book, Center for Political Innovation logo, written by Caleb Maupin, one of the big forces behind Center for Political Innovation. You can also see the logo here. While other organizations were aligning with the with the party of the institution, while others were out standing side by side with the pussy hatters and the xenophobic Russiagators, the people that would be at brunch if a Democrat was in office, while other leftist organizations were out spreading xenophobia on behalf of the more institutionalized, the more controlled finance capital party, the Democratic Party, the more efficient imperialist. Caleb Maupin and the Center of Political Innovation released a book on the dangers of Kamala Harris. And now she is going to be the vice president, and we're just a heartbeat away from a brutal prosecutor. I recommend people check out this book and support the Center for Political Innovation. Actually, this is a good quick note. Caleb Maupin will be joining us live on this program next week, same time.
Yep.
So same time next week, Caleb Maupin will be joining us live on this program. I'm getting a little tired. Anything else?
Yeah.
Oh,
Look,
go ahead.
I do know Bob Campbell. If I think I know who you're talking about, and I'll bump into him, I'll let him know. You say hi, and yeah, look, you know, yeah, I'll certainly pass the message on for you as well. I think it's going to be a good one next week. Caleb has been. I know there was a comment about Caleb. There's no videos this week. He has been flat out busy. And it's just like at times when you do have your own time to yourself, you really need to sort of just have that time out in the evening, whatever, and rest, because there's just so much happening around the world at the moment. And that, yeah, it's certainly onto it. And just also on the CPI, I believe there's another big webinar conference on the 21st of this month, November, which will be 22nd our time here. And that'll be exciting. And I think Caleb will make more announcements of that as well. I'd like to register for that. And just on the update, we have been having some informal discussions about forming a CPI Australia as well. They have a Marxist or left-wing a proper think tank like that. So it's just it's just informative talks at the moment. We'll keep you up to date as well. But that'll be really good if we can get something going here in Australia as well. And we'll certainly I'll certainly make announcements about that as things progress further. And so fingers crossed. I don't want to build your hopes up too high. It's just informal talks at the moment, but we wanted to start establishing something sooner or later to formulate things so things. Probably be in the new year sometime anyway before that kicks off.
All right. Good night, comrades and friends. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, comrades. All the best.